I arrived at Tiwanaku with a headache that no potion could touch. Oxygen is a luxury the Andes seems loath to provide. Every step upward feels like a personal affront to the lungs, a reminder that the earth here does not care for visitors. Every breath felt rationed, thin as parchment stretched too far. The sun was unforgiving, not hot but absolute, bleaching the world until shadows had nowhere left to hide. Stone everywhere, ancient, fitted with a precision that made modern masonry look arrogant by comparison. They call this the cradle of the world. To me, it feels more like its headstone. Someone once came here hoping to break his soul into something eternal. It did not end well. That at least was the reason for my presence. A failed dark wizard, a pilgrimage undertaken in secret, an experiment meant to fracture the self not into weakness but transcendence. The fragments did not ascend. They collapsed. Witness accounts were incomplete. The body was recovered. The ambition was not. I was sent to determine why. Theories were abundant. Some claim the structures were built by ancient hands with ancient magic, aligned not for conquest but continuation. Others whispered that the ruins were discovered rather than raised, that the stones were older than the people who learned to live beside them. Britain predictably dismissed both possibilities and replaced them with a plaque. I walked past the outer stones and felt the pressure change, subtle but immediate. Not a ward, not a spell, a shift, like stepping into a different season without warning. And then I saw it. The gate of the sun did not announce itself. It did not loom or threaten or hum with latent power. It stood open to the sky, carved and patient, as though it had been waiting long enough that it had forgotten the need to perform. Someone was sitting near it. Not standing guard, not studying, sitting. She had her back against one of the stones, boots dusted pale with grit, sleeves rolled with the casual confidence of someone who expected no audience. In her hands was a piece of fruit peeled with deliberate care, the scent faintly sweet against the mineral air. This apparently was the Gatekeeper. No lectern, no instruments, no visible wards, no reaction to my arrival whatsoever. I had expected a custodian buried in ritual, a scholar defensive of her domain, a devotee. Instead, I found someone entirely at ease beside a threshold most cultures would have buried, locked, or tried to bleed secrets from. She did not look up immediately.
Professor Snape, you're early or late. It depends how much faith you place in timetables.
I stopped a measured distance from the gate, aware of my pulse, of the faint ache behind my eyes, of the way the air itself seemed to evaluate each breath I took. I was informed you were expecting me. She finally glanced over, eyes sharp, assessing, then returned to her fruit.
I was informed you were coming. Expectation implies anticipation.
No handshake, no formalities, no acknowledgement of reputation. The name passed through her space and left no mark. I had the distinct and uncomfortable impression that I was not the most interesting thing present. Behind her, the gate remained still. It did not behave like a doorway. That was my first correction. I had circled it twice before admitting the error. There was no threshold to cross, no plane to step through, no sense of beyond. Spells slid off its surface without resistance or protest, as though the stone found them irrelevant. Detection charms returned nothing useful, not blocked, not absorbed, simply unengaged. It's a filter. The gatekeeper hummed softly in agreement, still seated, still unhurried.
Most people insist it's a test. That's more flattering.
I stepped closer, close enough to see the wear in the carvings, smoothed not by erosion but by touch. Hands placed there over centuries, waiting hands, not grasping ones. A gateway implies destination. This has none.
No, it only decides.
I frowned. Decides what? She finally stood, brushing her hands together, fruit forgotten. She approached the gate not with reverence but with familiarity, like one might approach an old tree that had outlived several generations of names.
Intent, not spellwork, not power. Intent.
That at least explained the failed pilgrim. Dark magic, for all its innovation, is linear. It hoards, it drives forward, it builds monuments to itself and demands sacrifice. I raised my wand despite myself. Habit, training. The gate did not respond.
You can study it. It doesn't seem to mind.
I doubt that.
It's been looked at for centuries. It objects only to being used.
As I examined the carvings more closely, patterns emerged. Not symbols of conquest or dominion, but cycles, solstices, harvests, returns. The repetition was deliberate, almost comforting. No triumph, no ascension.
The gate allows passage only to those whose magic no longer insists on tomorrow.
I stilled.
In ancient times, only elders were permitted to approach it properly. Witches and wizards who had already lived, already lost, already finished trying to outpace death.
And what lies beyond? She shrugged.
No one knows, no one returns.
That should have unsettled me more than it did. I stepped forward. The air shifted. The stone brightened just barely, as though remembering a language it no longer spoke fluently. A seam of light traced itself along the inner arch, widening, inviting. I felt it then, the pull, not forward, not anywhere at all, as if something were asking me what I was prepared to relinquish, and then the gate closed. Not violently, not in rejection, simply finished. I drew back sharply, irritation flaring before reason could catch it. So, it refuses. The gatekeeper laughed. It startled me more than the gate's reaction had.
Oh no, it didn't reject you, Severus. It assessed you.
Briefly.
You are not unworthy, but you are far too heavy. Your magic is thick with what comes next. You are constantly bracing for the future. The gate cannot let you through because you are holding on to tomorrow so tightly that there is no room for you to pass through today.
The words struck harder than any denial could have. I looked back at the gate. It had returned to stillness, the light gone, the carvings mute. It doesn't whisper.
Why would it?
I didn't answer. My mind had already retreated to a damp, windowless room deep beneath London. I thought of the gate's sister, the veil. In the department of mysteries, the silence is a myth. The fabric never stops its restless, hungry fluttering. I felt a sudden, cold, dry swallow of realization. The veil whispers because we muffled it. We buried it in a basement, surrounded it with unspeakables, and treated death like a specimen to be quarantined. We made it lonely. Here, the gatekeeper sits in the sun and eats fruit beside a threshold to the infinite. Britain didn't misunderstand the veil. It was simply terrified of the silence it offered. This gate was calm because it had been allowed to remain part of the world, allowed to breathe, allowed to feel the sun and wind, allowed to exist. I did not approach the gate again. There was no point in repeating a conversation that had already concluded. Instead, I stood at a distance and let the stillness settle, aware of how loud my own thoughts had become now that the structure had withdrawn its attention. The headache lingered, dull but persistent, a reminder that the body keeps its own accounts even when the mind refuses to. Dumbledore would have called this a success. Data gathered, phenomenon observed, no casualties, no breach. And yet, standing beneath the open sky, I understood with uncomfortable clarity that Britain had never misunderstood the veil. It had been afraid of it. Afraid of thresholds that cannot be catalogued or commanded. Afraid of magic that does not promise progress. So it buried the veil, classified it. The veil is starved of purpose, and so it murmurs in protest. The gate is silent because it was never made a prisoner. It never feels lonely. I watched the light change as the sun descended, the carvings catching gold along their edges, warming the stone until it looked less like an artifact and more like something that belonged. Her words remained behind, snagged on the jagged edges of my thoughts. Your magic is thick with what comes next. Some burdens survive every war because no one ever puts them down. I had carried mine across borders, across years, across graves. Not because they were useful, not because they made me stronger, but because I do not know how to live without their weight. Behind me, footsteps crunched softly against stone. The gatekeeper stopped beside me, her presence unobtrusive, companionable in a way I had not earned. She watched the sunset through the arch, arms folded, expression content.
It always looks like that, as if it's letting go of the day on purpose.
She stretched, rolling her shoulders, then shook the dust from her robes as if concluding a long shift rather than a philosophical reckoning.
You look like someone who carries his work home. You've spent the day weighing your soul against a rock, Severus. It's a tedious hobby.
I glanced at her sharply, but she was smiling.
Come back to the village. There's a corn brandy that's much easier to swallow than your past.
She turned and walked away, unhurried. Whether I followed or not was apparently none of her concern. She was a woman who knew that invitations, like the gate itself, lose their power if they are forced.